afternoon, everybody. Really, as always, we appreciate you making time to kind of join us for these market happy hours where our goal is to try to inform you about the things that we're watching in the world, how this is impacting how we think about navigating this world through our investments. And of course, one of the things that we're all wrestling with now, kind of new territory, is this issue of how much politics and frankly now military issues are really entering into the discussions that we're having, volatility behind asset prices and so forth. And so we really felt that that was a major change that we're frankly going to be dealing with this for some time. So what we wanted to do is to kind of bring to you someone, our special guest today, Velina Tchakarova, who we think has done a wonderful job. And we've been following her work for some time. I don't want to steal her thunder in just a second. I'm going to turn it over to you and let her kind of walk through her background, some of the views she has and kind of why she has them. But the reason that I wanted to be really clear about why we've asked Velina to join us today is in the last several years of following her insights and her commentary, she's proven to be, in my opinion, one of the most insightful and forward-looking people who have really had a great framework for understanding how the world was kind of changing and what that might look like. And so she demonstrated to me that very clearly, and I really wanted to bring her on to be able to talk about these issues that really are driving so many of these asset price markets. And so basically, I would just like to turn it over to Velina right now, who's joining us from Austria. Thanks, Velina.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a great pleasure, and I am delighted to be with you today and to discuss some of my most favorite topics. So first and foremost, I would like to stress that my work has been derived from more or less 20 years of professional career based on an academic background from politics and economics. So I've combined both, and afterwards also working in the think tank landscape here in Europe, being in charge of the Austrian Institute for European Security Policy as a director since 2018, which is basically a classic think tank dealing with Austrian and also mostly European stakeholders and decision makers. What I have been doing specifically over the last 13 years is more or less strategic foresight coupled with trends analysis. In cooperation, of course, with our biggest partner, the MOD, the Ministry of Defense, and obviously it is no secret that scenario planning and strategic foresight has always been one of the main areas of activities for the MODs all over the world. Also, meanwhile, I'm an instructor at the Real World Risk Institute, led by the best-selling author Nassim Taleb. So I'm very much also into systemic risks and also geopolitical and geoeconomic risks. So what may be interesting for the audience is this kind of unique approach that I've developed over the time in order to not just reflect on global developments and system shifts, but also in order to be ahead of the majority of security and geopolitical experts in terms of assessments and scenario planning. So this approach is based on the one side on systems thinking, and it has combined basically the 5 most important systems: global trade, global economy, global energy, global finance, global monetary systems with their networks. And obviously after 2007, 2008, there was the first real observation, not just scientific one, or also in the financial world, that there was a new phenomenon, namely systemic risks. And then in combination with my background, which is realpolitik, this is a perpetual struggle for power, coming from the States, but also meanwhile from transnational companies. So this kind of perpetual struggle for power, struggle for mastery in this, kind of constellations between state and non-state actors. and also, of course, geopolitics and geoeconomics. So this kind of combination, well, puts me in a kind of a pole position when it comes to scanning signals, weak, strong ones, and then, analyzing obviously the signals in order to provide trends analysis, and based on this trends analysis.
I don't mean to interrupt you, Velina, but that was really how your work kind of came to my attention. In particular, probably the most noteworthy example. There's two that I'd like you just to discuss briefly. One was, I think, was back in 2015. You had kind of coined this term of dragon bear about essentially a kind of geopolitical alignment, for instance, between China and Russia. That's definitely playing out now. I know you were early on that. The second thing, of course, is to talk a little bit about, China now in the after this Russian invasion. And those, to me, are kind of, two areas where you've really demonstrated like a wonderful insight. If you could just talk a little bit about those two insights, please.
Exactly. So I was just about to finish that this was anyway my last sentence about my approach, the way I work. But based on that, and this is one of the examples, I coined the dragon bear as kind of a modus vivendi of systemic coordination between China and Russia in relevant systemic or let's say strategic domains. And I will explain a little bit more what it is about. But the most important thing is, of course, that to understand, so to say, to highlight is that these are all long-term oriented trends. So it's, of course, not meant for the daily analysis or assessment. And obviously in 2015, when I was pointing to the dragon bear, I was more or less in the minority of experts because the majority was absolutely convinced that China and Russia would never come closer because of historic reasons, mostly that they have never trusted each other, have been, involved in conflicts, and so on and so forth. But what is the dragon bear? Basically, this is now, of course, something that is already a reality, a geopolitical reality. It is neither an alliance nor a kind of an intent in this Western understanding or as seen from Western concepts, but it is actually an tactical, asymmetric relationship between China and Russia to navigate through this transitionary period of the international relations we are right now. And there are three main reasons, three main goals behind it. The first, of course, is to survive. So states behave first and foremost always in terms of survival and, of course, maximizing national interests. Second, important, so it's important for both to survive while navigating these transitionary waters of global affairs. Second, of course, is to create credible, and here, of course, I stress the word credible, counterweight to American global power projection, because United States is still the sole state actor with global power projection capabilities. And the third is also to create alternative institutions, so alternative structures, but also alternative connectivity in this transitional period of global affairs. Of course, why? Because this would not be under American control or under American influence. And one example only, for instance, in the wider Eurasia, in Central Asia, and parts of South Asia, China is pursuing a kind of terrestrial connectivity that would not be under American influence and would need, of course, Russia to provide specifically for security and diplomatic clout. So obviously China is predominantly setting the tone in this asymmetric relationship, but Russia is still very much needed from China's perspective in various ways. One, obviously, is to be a security provider. Another important point because of its major diplomatic portfolio and also foreign policy experience, specifically in international and regional formats.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so I guess with that context, Velina, would it make sense to kind of have the view, I guess, just me looking forward, making the assumption that that China is already much closer to Russia than anybody, has thought perhaps so far, and that could be a big part to in my opinion, now wearing my investment hat, let's say potential capital flight from China in terms of investors trying to avoid the fate that so many investors found in Russia, which is they got locked up within their capital was locked up in the markets when Russia kind of invaded Ukraine. And of course, the sanction boom kind of hit and really kind of broke the world. And as you may recall, and this just reiterate for our readers, one of the views that we've had for some time is that this was kind of a deglobalization cycle that was really reversing the 75 years of ever deepening globalization that's kind of driven the world. And this, to our research, is kind of the kind of key theme through which we're looking at all our investments to try to move from the last cycle's winners to the next cycle's winners. And so that's why, watching your instincts on this very early, Velina, you really kind of nailed that, which is one of the reasons that I kind of reached out after following your work for so long. Well, maybe what does this mean in terms of China and how lesson from them perhaps with Taiwan or how you see them kind of going forward.
Yes, before I move to China, I also want to clarify this is very important for the systemic geopolitical context. As you said, of course, there are major turbulences going on in the global economy, in the global finance and trade systems. And as I said, we have to, my approach is derived from looking carefully for all relevant signals, strong wicks, which point to systemic shifts in this, within these networks. So obviously, the decision, for instance, to deepen the relationship over the last 8 years was a mutual one by Russia and China in order to have a kind of, insurance in terms of, first and foremost, of course, the impact of the transition. Nobody knows in what kind of system we are, going to end up. Will it be a kind of a bifurcation of the system? That means two power centers, or will it be a kind of Pax Americana 2.0? That means that after the war by Russia, United States would emerge once again as after the basically Second World War as the sole state actor with global power capabilities, even more strengthened than before. So in a sense, it's very important to identify the context before we try to analyze also the motivations and, the interests of China or Russia in this case. And as you said, it is also very important that we have been in a deglobalization cycle already in 2012, 2013. So this is nothing new. And this will definitely have an impact on the decision or the decisions of both. Now, of course, Russia doesn't realize that it's no longer about, becoming a superpower. So in this next phase of the international relations is going to be all about China and United States. And once again, there is another trend that has been ongoing even before Trump, which is the trend of decoupling. It was just called differently under Obama's administration. So this kind of decoupling or entangle, basically drifting away from this systemic entanglement between Washington and Beijing is a trend that is going to be decisive for Chinese policies in this particular phase, given, of course, that first and foremost, it is a key year for the political elites. And second, of course, it is still about tackling the pandemic. So China is still very much in this, in this kind of approach of not getting away with it, on the opposite, due to the lockdowns. And finally, of course, because there are some foreign policy decisions that will be very much relevant for the Chinese future foreign policy. Namely, you mentioned Taiwan, and right now there is a lot of speculation that Taiwan scenario may be a similar one to what Russia basically launched on February 24th against Ukraine. And I would like to stress that there is no similarity between these two scenarios. Taiwan is a very different scenario in which China, first and foremost, is not intending right now to attack militarily. Second, of course, it is right now capitalizing on the diplomatic two-front scenario because United States fears that they have to deal simultaneously with both escalations. So it serves certain tactical interests in diplomatic terms. But for China, the way how it will deal with Taiwan, it will not have anything to do with what Russia actually did on February 24, namely to go or win on Ukraine, to make a move on Ukraine militarily by launching a full-scale war, which in fact backfired against Russian interests. So what China is right now doing is carefully observing how the whole response by the West has been organized from day one in terms of sanctions, in terms of political dialogue, and also in terms of concrete steps to increase the pressure on Moscow. And this is kind of a learning process for China in terms of possibility in the future if China decides to escalate on Taiwan. But I personally do not anticipate such scenario. On the opposite, I do argue that China has no short-term interest in attacking Taiwan. On the opposite, it will actually seek to undermine the social, economic, and political fabric of Taiwan in the long term. It has a lot of time until 2049 to do so, and it will be an approach which I think is going to be a death by thousand cuts, in which at the end China sees itself as the winner.
Well, and there I wanted to ask you kind of a follow-up question on that point, Velina, in that one of the things that our research has identified, and it's been a key part of how we've been navigating the markets recently, is that essentially the Chinese property market, which is a $60 trillion asset class, one of the biggest ones in the world, in our opinion, is irretrievably broken, and that with that, it's taken Chinese growth with it. And so, like you, I'm kind of a lover of history, and if you go back and you read what happened in the lead up to Japan's and kind of long bomb invasion, not invasion, but strike on Pearl Harbor, one of the things in my read of history is they moved because they were kind of desperate, because they felt like they would never have a better opportunity, and that they were slipping away from kind of the US. And so I guess with that context, with me having that fear, and trying to use, your proven insight in this, if somebody told you that, Velina, I know for a fact that, Chinese economy is going to be impaired going forward, and this whole salesmanship job the Communist Party's done is going to fail in terms of like the inevitable rise of China, how would that change your thinking, or what do you think the world might look like if that were in fact the case?
Yeah, first and foremost, we are dealing with scenarios. That means alternative futures, and nothing is certain. The only certainty is actually that everything is shifting. So change is the only actually, thing that is for certain. Second, China's rise is also something very much undetermined, in a sense that we still don't know whether China will actually succeed in transferring its huge geoeconomic cloud, which was definitely on the rise over the last 20 years, into global power projection. So this is obviously the goal of China, for which China also needs to decouple from United States, to emancipate, so to say. That would also mean, of course, to create alternative networks in all these relevant socioeconomic systems, which will be costly, which will be also painful process. And given, the domestic processes at home, once again, this is not clear that it will be successful. Also, what is important to understand is that the decoupling is a mutual process. Also, that means that United States equally seek to decouple from China, and to actually engage other like-minded partners in the Indo-Pacific and in East Asia, in order to actually reconfigure these networks and reconfigure also supply chains. In this kind of mutual decoupling, there are not so many options in an interconnected world. So the interconnected world was more or less an unforeseen and unanticipated effect from the globalization cycle prior to the deglobalization cycle. So the outcome of this previous globalization cycle was this kind of unforeseen interconnectedness. And right now, nobody can tell how this interconnectedness will actually get less connected, right? So this is once again going to be a very painful process for not just states and companies, but also for the population. Right now, on the one side, we are dealing on the one side of the coin, that means the West, we are dealing with a lot of socioeconomic repercussions, such as, for instance, the disappearance of the middle class as we knew it from the 20th century, which was one of the biggest phenomenon of the political systems in the 20th century following the end of the Second World War. At the very same time, on the other side of the coin, what we are observing, for instance, in Asia, is exactly the rise of a middle class. And this middle class will seek to emancipate and will formulate its own political goals, which is going to, of course, put a lot of pressure on the political systems and on the political elites amid a trend of increasing authoritarianism in all of these systems. So on the one side, democracies will be in a transformation and will suffer from the weakening of the middle class. On the other side, there will be a rise of authoritarian systems. And of course, with the pressures coming from the bottom, and all of this will create a very volatile environment for companies, international and also national ones, to operate and to actually thrive. So in a sense, what I foresee, what for me will be really key in terms of signals for systemic shifts is, first and foremost, of course, it's all about political economy. So which system is going to succeed, right, in this competition? It's a competition between two systems, first and foremost. So which one will be more appealing? Which one will create more networks around itself? Right now, China is we should remind ourselves of the fact that China has become a trading partner number one of almost the whole world. Then, of course, it's all about who is going to ride the technological revolution, the fourth industrial revolution. We are in the middle of it, and that means that the victor of the fourth industrial revolution, the power that will, and it's still once again a competition between China and the United States. So the power that is going to ride the fourth industrial revolution is going to also be able to impose its rules of the game. Then it's going to be a lot about ideology, as I said, and finally it's going to be about how they are able to forge partnerships, alliances, and create concepts about how to not just survive, but get better in this transitionary period.
Well, and there, a follow-up question I would have, Velina, is that clearly I'm deferring to your well-established expertise, but if you, for instance, if China was going down a path of more conflict, I guess, with Taiwan giving some of these, frankly, I think if they understood how weak their economy is, they'd probably be doing a little faster. I mean, is there anything that we would see as outside observers that would suggest that maybe their potential conflict was getting closer?
Yeah, I understand that you're trying to bring me into a kind of scenario in which there is a possibility for such a military conflict. And once again, there is zero, China has zero interest in starting such military conflict against Taiwan. And since I am someone who is, very much coming from the angle of realpolitik, it's always about the national interest. First and foremost. It's not in the national interest of China to launch a military attack on Taiwan? Let me be very clear about it. Why is it? It's a very obvious why. First, because the prospect of winning against Taiwan is not there. So you have a huge risk coupled with huge critical uncertainty. And that is that you don't know how long it will take, and you don't know whether you will be successful. And in this particular, given this combination, no political leader will actually take a decision to make a move on Taiwan. Also, as I presented, there are many other better options for China to do so. If there is about any kind of foreign policy adventure that China may seek in order to also, specifically for Xi Jinping, to also serve the interests of those representatives of his closest circle, who are military hawks and are really into military adventures, then I actually argue that military tension and direct confrontation with India is likelier and more realistic in short term than actually a military attack on Taiwan. And there is a third very important dimension. Still, of course, China is benefiting from an interconnected world. So this kind of decoupling is not something that is going to take place in 1 year or in even, in a short-term window, but it is actually a process that is creeping and, long-term oriented. It may take a long time. And in a sense, if you have a military attack on Taiwan, even one day of blocking the Strait of Taiwan would mean devastating effects on the global economy. Take the incident with the Suez Canal, with being obviously one of these global choke points for supply chains. And this would be multiplied by, I don't know how many more times, because of course this particular area is a strategic one for not just China and East Asian partners, but also for United States to blockade sea transport, right? So in a sense, it does not make sense from this perspective either.
Well, let me, thank you. That's a very categorical and clear answer, Velina. Thank you. Just let me switch gears a little bit and give you kind of another hypothetical. One of the things that our research is focused on for a long time is the systemic problems that are within the current European community, namely that they don't have a common taxing authority, unlike the US. And so what this means is that, and there's no kind of federalized debt. So what this means, of course, is each sovereign country has to stand behind their own debt, but the currency with which they're paying that debt is one that they don't control, unlike the US dollar. So Europe, in my opinion, has been mired in this kind of slow growth existence due to these systemic problems that they have. And so what I would ask you to contemplate is again, if I were able to tell you that Europe would be vulnerable to a financial crisis, or maybe even were in kind of a crisis like that, how do you think that would impact, let's say, number one, maybe the ongoing conflict in the Ukraine, or two, this kind of global system that you've specialized in?
Yes, this is an important question because of obviously the integration efforts within the European Union, and there are anticipations that such a kind of integration efforts will continue following the war of Russia against Ukraine. Now there is obviously a trend towards more integration, institutional integration, because we have to also differentiate between enlargement, which is also European integration, by expanding the borders of the European Union and letting new members more or less join the Union, and also institutional integration, which is inwards oriented. And in this particular case, what you've outlined has a lot to do with the fact that we have ended up with one specific trading partner being trading partner number one for all member states, and that is Germany. So we have obviously a center, of trading power at the heart of the European Union, and this, trading power has established networks and deviations throughout the European Union, where more or less, as I said, all other 26 member states have been engaging with Germany, and once again, because we have one currency, the euro as a currency has not the same weight if you look it from the south or from the east or from the west of the European Union. So it has also a different weight, in a sense that, of course, there were member states that have profited a lot from introducing the euro, like Germany, obviously, and then there were member states that haven't profited at all from introducing the European Union, but actually increased this indebtedness and also the structural problems, like the southern or some of the Eastern members. And I think that despite all the efforts to further institutionally integrate the European Union, these kind of problems will remain, because these are structural problems. No matter what the ECB, the European Central Bank, or other institutional actors are going to do, right now they are planning once again to introduce huge programs like the next generation of, investing billions and billions for the recovery after the pandemic, or let's say the greening of the economy, basically meaning the decarbonization of the European economies. Once again, investing billions and billions. I don't think that the structural problems will be removed by that. So what I anticipate is are two trends. On the one side, there will be a core, mostly in the Western, in the old, as we say, in the old European Union members, that will be pushing for more institutional integration, because they have been already at a different level of integration, and they have been cooperating since the end of the World War II, and they are also a direct neighborhood. It's much easier. This is something that has been already shown, that basically it's the most efficient way to have trade with your direct neighbors. And then there will be another group which will consist of Central Eastern European members, which will be a kind of a fragmented bloc that will not seek to further integrate. On the opposite, there will be a cleavage, a growing cleavage, I'm afraid, that will basically grow, due also to the fact that their approach, not just to integration, but also to foreign actors, to countries like China specifically, but also Russia, is very different.
Well, and if I could ask you, this is a different follow-up question. One of the things that I think I've heard you mention on several occasions is kind of like the rise of India, essentially, as an important potential kind of potential ally, and definitely a country that nobody wants to have on the other side of these building coalitions. And this is perhaps particularly appropriate for us as investors, because it's been my experience that the greatest profits to be earned are basically when something happens it's kind of never happened before. And I began to go into China 20 years ago and spending a month every year over there. And I've never been to India, and so we're definitely open to perhaps that as a scope in our investment horizons, which are global. So why don't you talk maybe a little bit about, and maybe that's a jumping off point to a broader discussion, Velina, about maybe some of the changes that you foresee, outside of India, maybe things that people have not anticipated, when you kind of gaze into the future, because certainly you've got a wonderful track record of kind of seeing things appropriately.
So I'm very bullish. I would start with the fact that when it comes to trends analysis, I also coined the Indo-Pacific decade already, I think in 2020, that we will be actually, yes, in 2020, that we will be witnessing the emergence of an Indo-Pacific decade, that more or less the most significant changes and shifts are going to be located in the Indo-Pacific. And here we have, of course, two Asian giants, being involved in a direct military confrontation. But we also have a systemic decoupling, and we have also Russia, which is now reorienting or let's say shifting its focus from Europe towards also the Indo-Pacific and Eurasian and Central and South Asia. So Russia, I argue, started this war also because it wanted to close the chapter on Eastern Europe and to start with this vertical expansion towards Eastern Africa, and from there also through military bases to get an access to the Indian Ocean. So a lot is going to happen in the Indian Ocean, of course, but also in South and Southeast Asia, being projected the largest, first and foremost, the largest growing, the fastest growing and the largest growing region in demographic and economic terms. Second, with India being projected to become a third world, world economic power in this or probably the next decade. And also given the systemic processes, I argue that India will have to play an increasingly important geopolitical and geoeconomic role for both rivals and partners. Now, as I said, there will be a kind of a cleavage between Anglosphere and continental European powers in terms of their approach to the dragon bear. But there will be also a kind of a cleavage in terms to their approach to future potential partners and allies. Now, we've observed on the one side that, for instance, some of the Indo-Pacific nations were basically refusing to take sides. So most of these regional players, including India, do not want to get caught in a binary world. And India would have, I argue, two options: either to build its own relevant, center of power, regional power, by engaging, of course, with relevant Anglosphere partners. Being, of course, United States, UK, but also other relevant partners from the quadrilateral format, with Japan, Australia, but also, of course, other relevant East Asian countries. On the other side, India would pursue a third way, similar to the European Union powers, to the continental European powers, that also do not want, more or less, to put it, in a funny way, they want to have the cake and eat it. So obviously, on the one side, they benefit from the sea-controlled transport routes in the Indo-Pacific, because more or less 80% of the European trade is still being conducted via these Indo-Pacific sea lines that are still being controlled and protected by the United States. But on the other side, the European Union does not want to be a security provider in the Indo-Pacific, except for France. And obviously, of course, UK. And in this particular case, there may be also a kind of third way approach between India and the European Union, in a sense that they create a kind of a geoeconomic bloc in order to not take sides between Washington and Beijing. So these are currently the trends. As I said, either a kind of strategic alliance with the United States, but I don't think that India would be really ready to do so. Which is why it will be more like fluid geopolitical constellations, building counterweight to China, obviously, but India once again is going to pursue its own geopolitical interests. And here, once again, there will be also stable partnership between New Delhi and Moscow, because India wants a stronger presence of Russia in the Indo-Pacific because of China. So it is a very fluid, very uncertain world in which everyone will have to navigate, but some will be confronted with a decision, either or decision at some point of time, like Australia did.
Well, Velina, this has been really useful, for me. I hope our kind of audience has gotten the same, from it. I mean, again, one of the reasons I wanted to reach out is I definitely felt that, the way you were looking at the world would be ever kind of more valuable to, someone who's trying to, navigate capital through a changing world. I mean, the pace at which changes are taking place in the military and political sphere, and directly, irretrievably, perhaps, changing the economic landscape as well. I mean, I've made the point that, if somehow peace broke out tomorrow in the Ukraine or something, I don't think that the Europeans are ever going to be comfortable having the same amount of energy dependence they have on with the Russians, for instance. And so to my way of thinking, we really have sparked a very, meaningful change in the way the world is structured. And if the political and the military side is driving it, I think the economics are definitely going to flow through. So I think, as you find so many times at kind of cyclical inflection points, we're going to have to go from kind of having one set of expertise to navigate one cycle to another set of expertise to navigate another cycle. And so I would just express my gratitude that I've been able to find somebody with your insight, and that you've been kind enough to kind of, spend this time, with me and with our audience to kind of share, your views. Certainly I think this kind of analysis is going to be really important as we try to think through in the investing world, what are the kind of problems the world is trying to reach a solution for. And then our goal has always been to kind of invest in the solutions to those problems, because we think that's how society kind of proceeds. I guess the last thing I would ask you, perhaps, Velina, is there anything that we haven't kind of talked about in terms of maybe a scope of unexpected, change that you think we ought to kind of keep our eyes out for, that maybe would be a surprise to current thinking?
Mm-hmm. Oh, many things. Of course, we cannot cover even 1/5 of all the relevant.
I'm going to make you do one, and you're going to have to do it short.
We've just been scratching on the surface, unfortunately, because these are really complex, systemic processes. But what is very important is that each technological revolution, each industrial revolution, has been impacted by the introduction of a new source of energy. As you rightly pointed out, right now, Europe doesn't have the best cards because it hasn't diversified on time. It's going to increase its dependence now also on the United States. I foresee at least this kind of trend where there will be, stronger bond technological trade and energy one between United States and the European Union at the institutional level, which of course contradicts all the goals of reconfiguring supply chains and introducing strategic sovereignty. And given another trend that I foresee, namely that there will be an American withdrawal from various parts of the world. So Afghanistan wasn't a coincidence. It was, I argue, very much a deliberate process, and was, awfully conducted, but it was absolutely, from a realpolitik point of view, the right thing to do in order to create troubles for China, to, let China do its homework and provide for the security in the direct neighborhood. But one significant trend to follow is what kind of energy, what will be the next, the next energy source? Will it be renewables as some point to, decarbonization, or will it be another, nuclear fusion? Nuclear energy was the energy source of the last, industrial revolution. The second thing is, of course, the digitalization, because right now there is such an immense competition between two rivals, and everyone is lagging behind. I mean, the European Union, India, everyone else. It's only about Washington and Beijing, about United States and China. But this is going to be decisive for, for shaping this competition, and it's going to be also decisive who is taking side with whom. Here, I already observe a kind of a trend that the European Union and India are siding with the United States. Mm-hmm. And this, of course, will end up also with a kind of, dependence of a new sort, which we don't know exactly how will be shaped. And finally, Of course, the war in in Ukraine isn't over. I think that it's going to take last much longer, but it's going to be decisive also for the Dragon Bear. I mean, given the fact that it's a tactical relationship, it's going to be very decisive for this next phase in the international relations and how China is going to position itself. Will the mask finally be off, so to say? China will, finally expose itself as this true competitor that they have been preparing, to become. So these are all question marks, and we need to be alert about it.
Well, there's no doubt about that, Velina. If there's one thing I suppose I've discovered in my investment career is the market continuously presents us with problems to solve, but at the same time, people that can profitably solve those problems get rewarded for it. So I suppose it's kind of a never-ending game as the world changes and we try to stay ahead of it. And so with that, I wanted to thank you and also just express my gratitude that in grappling with changes like this, that we have the ability to tap the expertise of experts like yourselves, and you've been very kind in terms of making that expertise available to me and to our audience. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me. Well, it's a big pleasure to discuss these topics, and I hope that I will have the chance to to talk about them again once we have some more ideas about the directions of one or other trends.
Yeah, I feel pretty confident we'll have this conversation again later. Thanks a lot, Velina. Have a great day.
Thank you very much.